Hello and welcome. I'm so grateful to have you here with me on the call tonight. Thank you for joining our Connections of the Heart call as we explore loving all of you. My name is Linda Diefenbach, and I'm a holistic healer and coach and the owner of Wellness and Harmony. Through my work, I facilitate deep-level healing that enables people to overcome their life challenges caused by traumatic events so that they can move beyond their emotional woundedness, reclaim their power, and empower their lives by embracing their wholeness. Much of my work centers on the consciousness of the chakra system and in healing through the heart center, which has led me to create this series, Connections of the Heart, as a method of bringing you information and tools that you may use to help you live more joyfully from the heart. So before we get into the content of the call, I'm just going to go over some general housekeeping info. First, to gain the full benefit of the call, I recommend that you participate in a quiet place that is free from distraction. So be sure to turn off any electronics and ask anyone that you live with to please not disturb you for the next hour or so. So I'm going to have all of the lines muted. If you want to ask any questions, share any insights, I invite you to press *6 to unmute your line. And also want to make sure that you are aware that the call is being recorded. Okay. So tonight we're going to be exploring the rich and fertile area of the shadow self, what it is, how we create it, and how it affects our lives. So I encourage you to ask any questions and share any insights as we go throughout the call this evening. So to begin, I'd like to take a few moments to get everyone grounded and present and connected for the call. So if you could take a moment and please close your eyes and begin just taking a nice deep breath, bringing the breath in through the nose, allowing the breath to come fully down, filling the lungs, allowing the belly to expand. And then slowly and gently release the breath through your lips. And take another deep breath in. Hold. And gently release. And one more time. Okay. And I invite you to continue breathing gently and slowly, following the breath as it comes in through the nose, feeling the rise and fall of the chest and abdomen, and just gently feeling the breath releasing through your lips. And as you do so, allow yourself to become aware of your body, become aware of your energy field. Become aware of any sensations in your body. And if you're feeling any tension, stress, discomfort in your body, I invite you to just breathe into it and tell yourself to relax, relax, relax. Allowing yours to become more and more present in the body, more and more aware of sensations in the body, more and more aware of your energy field, just sensing and noticing the space around you. And as you continue breathing deeply and slowly, I invite you to visualize, sense, feel, imagine, or intend a grounding cord that is wider than your hips to drop down from the base of your spine, dropping down through the chair or cushion beneath you, down through the floor below, and down into the earth, allowing it to drop down deeper and deeper through the many, many layers of the earth's crust, deeper and deeper into the earth, until it enters into that molten center of the earth. And as it reaches the center of the earth, just anchor your grounding cord there in the center of the earth, allowing the Earth Mother to hold you fully and completely, feeling her as she supports you, as she always supports you. And if you have any worries, stress, tension, frustration, anything that's bothering you from the day, just drop that down the grounding cord. Let it go down through that grounding cord, down into that transformative molten center of the earth to be transmuted and transformed. And just allow yourself to let it go. And as you continue sending any energies down into the grounding cord, continue breathing deeply and slowly, allowing your energy to continue to drop down into the body, into the present moment. And I invite you now to bring your attention into the center of your chest, into your heart center. And just let your attention rest there at the heart center. And as you do, allow the heart center to open and become receptive and relaxed. Allow yourself to become very present in your heart center. And take another gentle cleansing breath in through the nose and out through the mouth. And slowly and gently release your focus and open your eyes, intending for your body to stay grounded, connected, and centered throughout the course of the call. All right. So I'd like to take a moment to check in if anyone would like to share. As I said, we're going to be talking about the shadow self tonight, and I'd love to hear from you. And just share, of course, introduce yourself and share what the shadow self means to you, and share any experience you may have with the shadow work. So I'm going to unmute the lines, and if there's anything that you want to share, feel free to speak up and just say your name and whatever you'd like to share. Well, everybody's going to be quiet tonight.
Hi, Linda. This is Aja. I hope you're well.
Hi, how are you?
I'm fine. I hope everyone on the call is doing well. I have a confession to make that I really don't even know what the shadow is. So
Okay.
I'm really hoping to get a little bit more clarity on that so that I could share.
Okay. No, that's fine. For some people, it's definitely a new area. So, and that's what the call is about, is introducing you to the shadow self and helping you become familiar with it. So hopefully you'll gain a lot of benefit from the call.
Thank you.
So great, and I'm glad you're here. So if you could just press *6 to mute your line, we'll see if anyone else wants to share. And if not, then we will just continue on. All right, so let's just continue on then. So I have to admit, the shadow self has become one of my favorite areas of exploration into the self. I have learned so much about myself as I explored this aspect. My shadow has ended up being a very major catalyst of transformation in my life, as well as in the lives of many of my clients. So we're going to begin by exploring what the shadow self is and what it is not. Okay. So in the barest form, or the basest form, the shadow refers to aspects of ourselves that we have disowned or dissociated from. It's a part of ourselves that we judge and that we do not openly express or have completely separated from. And this dissociation happens for a number of reasons. It may occur following a traumatic experience or through absorbing and internalizing cultural, societal, and or familiar norms and expectations. There's many subtle messages that we receive from our family, from our friends, our teachers, and many others that have taught us what was considered good and what was bad, what was acceptable and what was not acceptable. And those parts of ourselves that we have learned that are not acceptable are ones that we have then dissociated from. So we may have dissociated from some part of ourselves as a result of some form of like a traumatic experience, such as experiencing abuse, where in order to survive in the situation that we lived in, we learned that it was unsafe to express a certain part of our personality and who we are. So, for example, maybe we lived in an environment with parents who were always fighting, maybe very aggressive, maybe there was domestic violence happening. And through that experience, we may have learned that anger is bad or that anger is unsafe. And therefore, in reaction to that, we do not allow ourselves to feel or acknowledge when we are feeling anger. Another example might be someone who is homosexual, who learns through societal norms, through their family, through religion, and so forth, that homosexuality is, quote, bad. And they then, in trying to come to terms with their sexuality, they end up repressing their sexuality and other aspects of themselves in order to be accepted and to survive in their environment. So another maybe more subtle example is, say, as a very young child. Say you were very happy, joyful, singing and dancing, and just really enjoying and loving being in your body, and being in some experience and just being in your joy. And mommy has a migraine. So perhaps in her pain, she lashes out, demanding that you stop, that you be quiet, something like that. Or perhaps you just simply see her suffering. And because the child is unable to differentiate self from others, the child may internalize that she is the reason that mommy is sick. So she realizes that her singing, her dancing, her voice, her expression of her joy is somehow bad or the cause of another person's suffering. And so the child then represses or disconnects with that part of themselves because they don't want to cause suffering for anyone, and especially, of course, their mother. Or simply the child may overhear judgments that others may have about celebrities, politicians, and so forth. And because of what they're hearing people say about other people, they disown from similar qualities within themselves that they associate with the others in order to be acceptable. So as I'm saying this, I'm thinking, my own experience. Actually, Madonna comes to mind. So because she was, as I was growing up, she was very openly expressing herself as a very powerful, sensual, sexual woman. And there was a tremendous amount of controversy and judgment that I saw and heard and witnessed about her, and that, along with many of the other messages about women and sexuality, really led me to repress many aspects of my own sexuality or feel ashamed of aspects of my own sexuality, just as has happened with so many women. So these are just some examples of how the shadow selves are created. So I want to pause here and just give you an opportunity to ask questions or share any insights before we go further into the call and see if you have any questions. So I'm going to unmute the lines, and if you have any questions, just let me know.
Hey, Linda, this is Aja again.
Hi.
Okay, I totally get it now. And I can say that for myself, I had realized or had to take a serious look at my shadow self in dealing with my religious beliefs and coming to terms with what my true values and beliefs were, because being a practicing very, very strictly in my religion, I was told what I had to do to be successful and what it meant and how I had to live my life, and I did all those things, and they started to not feel good to me. So I really had to dig down and take a look at my shadow self and decide what it was that I thought was proper and what felt good for me, and yeah, so I totally understand now what you mean by shadow self.
Okay, great.
Thank you so much for explaining that to me. I really appreciate that. Thank you.
You're welcome, and thank you for sharing that. As wonderful as our religions, all the religions can be, and our spiritual paths, they can also very much be a catalyst for creating the shadow self, because there's areas where they do compartmentalize and create judgment, even though that maybe isn't the nature of the religion as a whole. Some of the practices that develop out of that come into that too. So thank you so much for sharing that. That's a great insight. Okay. Do we have anyone else with any questions or comments or insights? Okay. So I'm going to mute the lines and go on. Okay, and thank you for sharing. So now let's talk about the effect of the shadow self. So as I shared in some of the examples, I'm sure you probably can think of a number of different things that have begun to surface in regards to how this affects you in your life or has affected you in the past, which is why, while the shadow can create so many problems for us, it's also such a rich area for healing and personal growth and transformation. And it's interesting because this is an area where, we feel ashamed, where we have judged ourselves or we have been judged about who we are. So many people really are afraid to take a look at the shadow self. Again, because of that shame and that judgment, we think that these parts of ourselves are bad, or we're afraid that if we connect with our shadow, if we embrace our shadow, that we will somehow become unlovable and unacceptable. So we often shy away from dealing with it and looking at it and thinking about it. It's interesting when I do classes about the shadow, you get some people who come in and they're curious. Some, they don't really understand it. You get some people who understand what it is and the value of it, so they get very excited about it. But more often than not, you get a lot of people who are just like, no, I don't want to go there. And that's perfectly fine if that's where the person is, but a lot of that comes from a misunderstanding about what the shadow is. They think that the shadow is evil. They think that the shadow is bad, and it's really not. And it's important that we understand that just because we try to ignore it, it doesn't make the shadow self go away, and it doesn't mean that it's not there. Quite the contrary, actually. When we dissociate from parts of ourselves, when we judge and disconnect from parts of ourselves, those parts begin to actually control our lives unconsciously. The shadow will express itself. And if we don't acknowledge it, if we don't look at it, those unconscious actions actually become the area, like fertile ground for basically self-sabotage and us becoming our own worst enemy. The shadow may express itself through addictive behaviors, through poor self-care or self-destructive behaviors, problems with our jobs, with our families, with our relationships, really with all aspects of our lives. So to give you an example of how the shadow may work when it's not being addressed and dealt with, would be anger. Anger is a very common aspect of ourselves that is forced into the dark. In our society, many of us don't understand anger. We see anger expressed in ways that are dangerous, that are unhealthy, that are hurtful, through abuse, through violence, and other things. And we don't actually fully understand that anger itself in its purest form is a very necessary and very healthy emotion. It's when anger is not expressed in its pure, healthy form is when it turns into violence, when it turns into abuse, when it turns into self-destructive patterns. It turns into rage. It turns into passive-aggressive behaviors. So that is a wonderful example of how the shadow becomes a problem because we ignore it. But if we actually learn to connect with the emotion of anger, we learn to acknowledge it within ourselves, and we learn to process it and feel it and let it move in its natural, healthy, appropriate manner, then anger is a powerful ally, because it's how we keep ourselves safe. It's how we recognize if we're being violated and how we can step forward and say, no, this is not acceptable. But when anger is unexpressed, that's when it turns sour. That's when it eats away at us. It eats away physically at our bodies. It eats away at our spirits. It eats away at our emotions, and it eats away at our psyches. And it expresses itself in abuse in a variety of different ways, whether it's covert or overt. Sexuality is another big shadow area for many of us. And because a healthy sexuality is not allowed, it's judged, it's shamed, we often hide our desires, and then we begin to act them out covertly through sexual deviance, through abusive behaviors, through pornography, through a number of different avenues. And, as an example, the abuse cases that have occurred in the Catholic Church is a really prime example of how this happens. The Catholic Church does not allow its priests and nuns and even its members to express their sexuality in a healthy way, especially the priests. So the priests and the nuns. So because that part of the human body, what makes us human, our sexuality, is denied in the priests, then that results in those covert abusive behaviors. Another example of how this plays out and affects people's lives is if you think of some of the politicians who have been caught in various covert sexual acts, having somebody who's an upstanding, quote, citizen and politician, family man who is found having sex with another man in a bathroom, that's a result of his repressed sexuality that's, coming out and basically sabotaging him because he's not allowed or allowing himself to express himself in a healthy way. So I want to just pause there for a moment for any questions and insights or comments, because that was a lot, or just to allow you a moment to just kind of take that all in and digest that a bit. Okay, so I want to be really clear about one thing, which is that we all have a shadow self, and it affects our lives whether we acknowledge, whether we want it to or not. And I say this because I don't want to introduce more shame into this process. It's a very natural part of the human experience. Our job is to recognize and acknowledge that we have a shadow self, that we have parts of ourselves that we've shoved into the dark, and to accept this and then to begin to connect with and begin to own the shadow self. And the piece that I want to be really clear on that is that we connect with and own it. The goal is not to get rid of the shadow self. It is to connect with, so for example, the anger. If anger is one of your shadows, one of the parts of you that you've put into the dark, it's not about getting rid of your anger, because you can't do that. And by trying to get rid of your anger, that's what's created the shadow. But it's about learning to actually connect with anger in a healthy way and acknowledge anger and work with anger. So that it's not coming out as rage and passive aggression and abuse and self-harm and harm of others and, other forms of violence. So So again, our job isn't to get rid of the shadow, but to bring the shadow into the light and bring it into acceptance. So, as I said earlier, the shadow is one of our most powerful gifts and allies for personal transformation and awakening. Often your greatest gifts lie within the shadow. From that anger, for example, can lie tremendous passion and motivation and ability to really thrive in your life. Ability to stand up for what you need and what you want. Through, that child who silenced her voice because mom was sick and she was afraid of her voice. In that shadow may lie, a tremendous ability to express herself in a way, through music, through the arts, through any number of things, through public speaking, through just how she connects with the world that is hidden away inside herself. And when she connects with her voice, she connects with her creativity, she connects with her joy, then she may be able to really shine much more. She will be able to shine much more brightly in her life. So, as I said, our greatest gifts lie within the shadow. The reason that the shadow currently creates problems is simply because it's disowned, it's judged, and it's in the dark. And so the shadow is seeking to find expression through the darkness. But when you actually acknowledge it, accept it, own it, and bring it out into the light and allow it to be expressed through the light, that's when you're going to discover your gifts and the gifts that the shadows have to offer. So I'm going to pause here again and just give you a moment to digest that. And if you have any questions or comments, feel free to bring them up now. Okay. So, obviously, in a short call, we're really limited in how deeply we can go into this material because it is very, very rich and very, very deep. But my invitation to you, if you really want to make changes in your life and stop sabotaging yourself and stop being your own worst enemy, is to really begin exploring your shadow and learning how to bring it into the light. So the shadow process is a real integral part of the work that I do. So with my clients as well as with myself, and I love doing this deep, rich work, and it's just a phenomenal territory to travel through in the healing process. So before I go on, just want to say that if you are called to go further and really want to start healing your own shadow, I do invite you to sign up for a complimentary breakthrough session on my website, www.wellnessinharmony.com. And through that, you can learn how you can turn your shadow from being your worst enemy into being your greatest gift and ally. So to begin, one of the first steps in meeting your shadow and starting to heal your shadow or bring your shadow out into the light is through self-observation. The best way to identify what within ourselves we have disowned and shoved into the dark is by looking at what we judge in others. So if you just do some self-monitoring, even over, a couple of days, just watch as you're going through the world and noticing, as you're going through the supermarket and you're looking at people and maybe you're, seeing people having different types of interactions, and just pay attention to your thoughts and where you are judgmental, So I'm going to go back to the example of anger. You see someone else being angry, and instead of just simply being, that person's angry, and just acknowledging and being aware of where they are, you're coming from a state of judgment like, I can't believe they're so angry. They're, and, that's so awful. And how could they be that way? And, just completely judging them for being in their anger. That would be an indication that anger may be something that you have disowned within yourself, that you're not willing to connect with and acknowledge. There's a lot of aspects of shadow. Of course, our society, body image is a big issue within our society. So we often disown aspects of our body and how we treat ourselves, and how we treat our bodies. So we may have a lot of judgment about weight, or how people eat, or what people look like, how they dress, and things like that. So that may be an indication of something, if that's a place that you're judging, be an indication of something that has been put into the shadow in some way for you. So as I said, I invite you to start just paying attention. Pay attention to your judgments. Pay attention to how you judge others, how you talk about others, and how you judge yourself. If you pay attention to your own self-talk and inner dialogue. And start journaling about it. Just start taking notes about it, and start exploring that. So if you're seeing these judgments, okay, what is this? Where is this coming from? And see if you can start working with the energy that you're disowning. So, again, listen to your conversations, listen to your inner dialogue, listen to your self-talk, journal about it, write it out, and really look at it. So I'm going to pause for questions here. So again, if you have any questions, insights, thoughts, I know this is a very big, rich area, and a lot to take in the course of the call. So please don't hesitate to ask any questions. And if you have questions, I will also want to say, if you have questions that come up after the call, or for those of you listening to the recording, you also are welcome to email me with any questions at linda@wellnessinharmony.com, because I know some people are not comfortable talking on the call since it's being recorded, and I understand that. So, but if you do have any questions, just let me know. Okay, so again, I want to invite you to really allow yourself to explore this area. Getting into the work with the shadow self, it's not a quick and easy process, but it is at the same time one of the quickest ways to make real and significant change in your life and really learn to connect with yourself and start loving yourself fully and completely. Because as you work with the shadow and you start bringing those aspects of yourself into the light and start really loving and accepting all of those parts of yourself, then you really come into fuller expression of your own wholeness. And you're able to move through the world as all of you, in an expression of all of who you are, which brings you a tremendous amount of personal healing, personal power and empowerment, and a tremendous amount of joy. Allowing yourself, I should say, to express a full range of emotions, to be joyful, to be comfortable in your body as it is right here, right now, in this moment, to be comfortable with your silliness, be comfortable with your impatience, be comfortable with your, whatever, but everything about you is allowed. And you will find, if you start really working within this realm, that you have tremendous, tremendous gifts that are lurking in the shadow right now, that are just waiting to be expressed. And it was also going to have a huge impact on your physical, emotional, and psychological health, in addition to your energetic health. Because, as I said, those parts of us that we put into the dark and that we disown, those aspects will find a way to express themselves sideways, basically. So they become like a festering in the body where we become sick. They become an aspect of ourselves where that creates addiction, whether it's addiction through self-medicating, whether it's addiction through food or sex or gambling or shopping, just a wide variety of addictive behaviors that are harmful, that lead to a lot of illness in our lives, and lead to a lot of problems with relationships that we have with others, and a lot of problems that we have with relationships with ourselves. You know, if you allow all of you to be who you are and are able to love all of who you are, then you're going to be so much happier in your life in so many ways. And as I said, just for my own personal transformation, when I first was introduced to this work several years ago, I was definitely very scared, because it was stuff that I didn't want to look at. I didn't want to look at my anger. I didn't want to look at my, my power. Power was something for me that was definitely in the dark. I didn't want to look at my voice and my expression. I didn't want to look at all of these things because to me, because of my life experience, all of those things were bad. And I didn't want to be bad. And I didn't want to be rejected. And I didn't want to be disowned. But as I started, taking that risk and stepping into working with the shadow self, it was absolutely, completely, and utterly liberating. Such a tremendous freedom that came from beginning to work with this, and it continues to come with working with the shadow self because it's an ongoing process. And as I said, we all have a shadow self. It's part of the human experience. And we all, as we go through and we start, we're like an onion, so as we go through and we start working on one level of the shadow, we'll find others and others, so it's a continual process of self-growth. But it goes from being something that you dread to being an adventure, oftentimes, and an excavation of self that, you find amazing, gorgeous, beautiful artifacts within the self that you can bring out and bring into the world and really share your gifts. So, again, I really strongly encourage you to look into this work. There's a lot of great resources out there, too. One book that I absolutely love is by Debbie Ford. She was a wonderful voice for the shadow self and really did a wonderful job in bringing the shadow to more common or more popular awareness. Popular is not the right word, but you get what I mean. And she wrote a book that I love called The Dark Side of the Light Chasers. And, in addition to looking at healers or coaches, to help you start to work with this process, I would strongly recommend that book because it's amazing. And it'll really give you a lot of insight, wonderful insight into this process. So I'm going to pause again, see if anybody has any questions or comments. So I'm going to unmute the lines, and if you have any questions, feel free to speak up. I'd love to hear from you. Okay, we got a quiet group tonight. All right, that's fine. As I said, if you have any questions that come up after the call, after you've digested the information that's been shared, or you start, the self-exploration and looking at those areas that you're judging with yourself and others, please do feel free to contact me and email me. Again, my email is linda@wellnessinharmony.com. And if you are interested in going further with this work, I would love to connect with you and talk with you. And you can register for a complimentary breakthrough session at www.wellnessinharmony.com. So I just want to thank everyone for joining me tonight. I really enjoyed sharing with you, and I would love to hear your insights and thoughts if you have anything. So please feel free to share. You can email, or if you have anything before we close the call, that's great too. And our next call, let me just look this up actually. Our next call, we're going to be talking about energy clearing and how we start, how we can keep our energy field clear and strong as we pick up energy throughout each day. And that call is held on July 15th at 8 p.m. So be again, same time and same channel. So I hope you're able to join us there. And again, that call will be recorded. So if you can't join us live, certainly join us for the recording. So thank you, everyone, and have a wonderful evening. And I look forward to connecting with you again soon.